He's living on the air in Cincinnati, Cincinnati, even though I can't sing, Gary.
The beloved radio station crew from the late 70s looked like the perfect sitcom family. But behind those bright studio lights, scandals were brewing that would shock America. One cast member hid a dangerous addiction that nearly destroyed everything. Another was living a double life that involved secret affairs and bitter court battles. And the most surprising revelation? The show's biggest star was caught in a romance so explosive, it changed Hollywood forever. What really happened when the cameras stopped rolling will leave you speechless. Gary Sandy. Gary Sandy stepped into television with a past that felt heavier than most young actors could handle. Before anyone knew him as Andy Travis on WKRP in Cincinnati, he had spent years trapped in the world of soap operas, always playing the villain. On As the World Turns in Somerset, he slipped into characters who dealt drugs or caused trouble, and the roles stuck to him in ways he didn't like. His reputation followed him everywhere. Hugh Wilson's wife even warned him not to hire Sandy, saying he was nuts. But Wilson saw something in him and decided to take the risk. The network wanted a young leading man, so Sandy walked into the audition in tight jeans and perfect hair, because he knew exactly what television executives were hoping to see in 1978. Once he joined the cast, he realized right away that he wasn't the wild one. He was the calm center surrounded by Dr. Johnny Fever, Venus Flytrap, Les Nessman, Herb Tarlek, and Jennifer Marlowe. Each character had big energy, and Sandy became the steady force the show needed. Still, even with all the fun happening around him, he carried his own frustrations. He had dreamed of Broadway, dreamed of leading the stage, but more and more TV actors were taking the roles he wanted. Tired of losing parts, he moved to California, hoping that if he landed a TV series, he could someday return to theater with a stronger name behind him. What made Andy Travis feel so real was that Sandy had lived pieces of that world long before WKRP. Back in high school, he hosted a radio show at Dayton's Wing AM through a junior achievement club. Sitting behind the microphone as a teenager taught him how real radio people moved and sounded, and all those small lessons helped shape his performance later. Fans never forgot it, and neither did the radio community. Decades after WKRP ended, he won an Influencer Award from Radio Inc. magazine because so many people entering the industry said they grew up watching him. Even with all that praise, Sandy carefully avoided playing the same kind of character again. After WKRP, he turned down several similar roles because he didn't want to be stuck as the nice program director forever. He kept acting, guest starred on shows, stayed busy, and kept chasing work that pushed him. But the biggest surprise of his WKRP years had nothing to do with acting. Off camera, he fell into a romance with Loni Anderson. She wrote later that her relationship with Sandy felt like an addiction, and she could not keep her hands off him. Their chemistry lit up the screen because a piece of it was real. Their off-screen story became its own quiet legend, making Sandy part of one of Hollywood's most talked-about backstage romances. Tim Reed. Tim Reed's path to becoming Venus Flytrap carried a kind of fire that didn't die once the cameras stopped rolling. In 1978, he walked onto the WKRP set with a clear idea of who he didn't want to be. Venus was written as a mysterious, smooth DJ with slick charm. But Reed saw the danger of letting the character fall into old stereotypes. Even in his audition, he pushed back, telling the producers that Venus needed depth and layers that felt true. Instead of arguing with him, they listened. That choice changed everything. Reed ended up co-writing several episodes and guided the entire arc of his character with a steady hand. One of the most unforgettable moments came in an episode called Venus and the Man. Reed co-wrote it and starred in it. In the story, Venus talks a troubled teen out of gang life and back into school. The message hit so hard that the episode was turned into a comic book and printed in Scholastic magazine, reaching thousands of students across the country. Reed had always believed television could do more than entertain. That episode proved he was right. His life off-screen carried its own storms. Before WKRP, he created Tim and Tom, the first interracial comedy duo in the United States, with Tom Dreesen. They faced resistance everywhere they went, sometimes from audiences and sometimes from club owners. But Reed never backed away. He used humor to talk about race at a time when most comedians avoided the subject. The fear never stopped him. The pushback never stopped him. If anything, it sharpened his voice. Reed's personal life added even more depth to his story. He married Daphne Maxwell Reed, who would later become known to millions as Aunt Viv on The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. Their relationship came with its own twists. At one point, after a whirlwind romance and a 10-day separation, Reed saw her again at the airport and proposed right there in customs. It was messy and emotional and perfectly human. Richard Sanders. Richard Sanders built a character who felt so real that people still talk about him today. When he stepped into the role of Les Nessman on WKRP, he created a man who lived in his own strange world, proud of his tiny newsroom and serious about the oddest details. Viewers watched him stumble through broadcasts, argue over small facts, and treat every moment like breaking news. The funny part is that the famous bandages he wore in almost every episode started by accident. He hurt himself before filming the pilot, and instead of hiding it, the writers decided to keep the bandage in the show. It worked so well that even after he healed, he still wore one somewhere on his body. It became part of his face, his walk, his whole identity, like he couldn't function without it. When the show ended in 1982, the strength of that performance created a strange problem for him. Sanders kept getting cast as the same type of character. He appeared in Newhart, Murder, She Wrote, Designing Women, and Married with Children, usually playing someone tight, awkward, or nerdy. In 1991, he returned as Les Nessman in the new WKRP in Cincinnati, and even helped write several episodes with his wife Marilyn. Off-camera, his creativity stretched wider than people realized. He wrote, he produced, he shaped stories from the other side of the lens, proving he was more than the newsroom clown everyone knew. One of the wildest stories from his life came in 1985 when he brought Les Nessman to the real world. He traveled to Anchorage and hosted a radio show in full character. He spent the whole day delivering the news like Nessman would, mixing facts with panic, and even getting caught in a small traffic mess on the way. The line between actor and character disappeared for those listeners. For a few hours, Les Nessman existed outside the studio lights, and people loved it. By the mid-1990s, Sanders slowly stepped away from acting. He moved to Washington with his wife and lived quietly, far from cameras, yet his legacy never faded. Les Nessman stayed alive because the small details made him unforgettable. The bandages, the pride, the nervous voice, and the strange accidents turned a simple news director into a character people still quote and smile about. Jan Smithers. Jan Smithers entered Hollywood in a way that almost felt unreal. She was only 16, skipping school and relaxing at the beach, when two Newsweek reporters noticed her. Her relaxing afternoon turned into a moment that changed everything. Her photo appeared on the cover of Newsweek's teen issue in 1966, and suddenly, she went from an unnoticed teenager to someone agencies chased. By the time she finished high school, she was modeling, shooting commercials, and appearing in magazines. Hollywood arrived before she even knew she wanted it. When she got the role of Bailey Quarters on WKRP in Cincinnati, she became a familiar face in American homes from 1978 to 1982. What made her character special came from something very real. Jan was genuinely shy, not pretending, not performing it. The show's creator said auditioning actresses tried to play shy, but Jan simply was it. That honesty made Bailey feel soft, warm, and believable. She appeared in all 86 episodes and built a connection with viewers that never faded. After the show ended, her life turned in a completely different direction. She married James Brolin in 1986 and became stepmother to his 2 sons. Soon after, she had her daughter, Molly. But Hollywood, with all its pressure, noise, and constant attention, was not the life she wanted. By 1995, after 9 years of marriage, she filed for divorce. She stepped out of the spotlight and left California behind. She lived in Halifax for years, then traveled to India, searching for peace, meaning, and stillness. She embraced meditation. She supported environmental causes. She even spoke before Congress about solar power and her opposition to nuclear energy. The girl who once lit up magazine covers had turned into a quiet activist, far removed from the frenzy that once surrounded her. Loni Anderson. Loni Anderson became a sensation in the early 1980s as Jennifer Marlowe, the glamorous receptionist who always seemed one step ahead of everyone around her. Viewers loved her confidence, her charm, and the way she ran that radio station with a smile. But her rise to stardom opened the door to something much heavier. When she married Burt Reynolds in 1988, the world watched them like royalty. Their wedding looked like a Hollywood fairy tale, and for a moment, they felt untouchable. The truth behind that perfect picture soon unraveled. Their marriage fell apart in a storm of accusations. By 1993, stories of cheating, fights, and troubles linked to drug use circulated everywhere. Reynolds admitted to a 2-year affair. Anderson insisted she had never strayed. Their divorce finalized in 1994 and became one of the most bitter and expensive breakups in Hollywood. Years later, Reynolds still owed her money. Reports say he paid her more than $154,000 in 2015, along with many years of payments close to $47,000 per month. The wounds ran deep. Both blamed the other. The story followed them long after they split. Even after Reynolds passed away in 2018 and Anderson's own life ended in 2025, their relationship remained a symbol of how quickly fame can twist love into something painful. People still remember the chaos, the heartbreak, and the pressure that destroyed what once looked like a perfect match. Their story stayed alive because it showed how human even the brightest stars can be. Howard Hesseman. Howard Hesseman never felt like an actor pretending to be a DJ because he had already lived that life long before anyone put a camera in front of him. In the late 1960s, he sat inside a tiny San Francisco studio at KMPX-FM spinning rock records while the whole country shook with protests, marches, and loud ideas. He wasn't chasing fame then. He was chasing truth and trying to make people feel something through sound. Around that same time, he joined an improv group called The Committee, and they performed anywhere they were needed. Anti-war rallies, civil rights gatherings, street corners packed with people who were tired of being ignored. He would grab a mic, crack a joke, twist a line, and suddenly the crowd felt lighter. The funny DJ on TV later had been shaped by a real world full of smoke, noise, and restless energy. So when WKRP in Cincinnati started, and he stepped into the role of Dr. Johnny Fever, he didn't act. He simply opened the door to his past and let it walk onto the set. From the very first episode, he showed everyone what kind of force he was. He reached over, dropped the easy listening track, scratched in rock music, and shouted, "All right, Cincinnati, it's time for this town to get down." He improvised whole moments like that. He added lines that weren't on the page. He brought the old counterculture fire into a network studio. CBS never knew what to do with him. They kept moving the show around the schedule so often that it slowly grew its own underground following. Fever became the rebel voice people didn't know they needed. Hesseman earned 2 Emmy nominations, but the awards didn't define him. It was the raw truth in his performance, the kind that felt like a street poet had slipped into a sitcom. Even after WKRP ended, he didn't soften. He went on Saturday Night Live and pulled off a moment that stunned the audience. He mooned a picture of President Ronald Reagan and told viewers they could join him. It wasn't just for laughs. It was his way of saying he would never stop poking at power. That became the heartbeat of his career. On screen or off screen, he lived the same way, pushing edges and refusing to let fear guide him. Howard Hesseman left behind more than a role. He left behind a trail of moments that changed how people saw radio, comedy, and rebellion. Herb Tarlek. Herb Tarlek felt like the loudest joke in WKRP in Cincinnati, with his wild plaid suits, shiny white belts, and hopeless crush on Jennifer Marlowe. But the man behind him, Frank Bonner, had a life that could have been its own script. In 1979, during a break from the show, he agreed to film a stunt for a commercial in the Mojave Desert. He was parasailing behind an ATV when the rope snapped and threw him into the air. He slammed into the rocks and broke several bones. Doctors told him he needed months to heal. He came back anyway, smiling, still ready to play Herb like nothing had happened. Bonner found something even bigger after WKRP. He moved behind the camera and directed more than 100 episodes of sitcoms through the 1980s and 1990s. He directed Who's the Boss?, Just the 10 of Us, and an incredible 105 episodes of City Guys. His daughter later said he treasured WKRP because it opened the door to directing, which he loved more deeply than acting. He even kept Herb's bright white belts. Not as a joke, but because he understood they were part of a character people remembered with affection. His final years were quiet and heavy. He battled Lewy body dementia for 3 years before passing in 2021 at age 79. People who knew him, especially his wife Gail and his daughter Desiree, said he was gentle and humble, nothing like the loud salesman he played. And even though he had been married 4 times in the past, life surprised him with one last twist. He reunited with his high school sweetheart after decades apart and married her. It felt like the kind of ending a sitcom writer might dream up, only this time, it happened for real. Gordon Jump was nothing like the bumbling Arthur Carlson that millions saw on WKRP in Cincinnati. On screen, he looked confused and weak, a man who reached for a drink whenever stress hit him. In real life, he never touched alcohol, stayed loyal to his faith, and carried himself with a steady calm that surprised anyone who expected the same chaos he showed on TV. When he took the role of Carlson, he made it clear he would never cross personal lines. If a script hinted at heavy drinking, he played it in a gentle way, because he wanted the character's pain without losing his own values. People thought he was simply acting, but he was quietly setting boundaries in a business that rarely respected them. Long before Hollywood found him, he was a real radio voice in Ohio and Kansas, running shows, hosting programs, and learning the rhythm of broadcasting. When he moved to Los Angeles in the 1960s, he hoped the city would open a door, but it took time. His break finally came in 1978, when he stepped into the skin of Arthur Carlson, a man who always meant well even when nothing seemed to go right. After WKRP ended, the world discovered another version of him that would become even more famous. For 14 years, he appeared as the Maytag repairman in more than 77 commercials and ads. He played a lonely man who had no work because the machines never broke, and the role made his face one of the most recognized in American homes. Kids grew up knowing his smile without knowing his name. His life ended quietly on September 22, 2003, when he passed away at 71 from pulmonary fibrosis. He never smoked, ate healthy, and lived with care. Yet this rare disease still took him. Family gathered around him in Coto de Casa as he slipped away. His career felt gentle from the outside, but anyone who knew him saw the strength behind it. A man who carried honesty into every job and stayed the same even when fame tried to bend him. Carol Bruce. Carol Bruce, the woman who towered over everyone as Mama Carlson, lived a life filled with sharp turns and loud surprises long before she stepped into that icy role. In the late 1930s, she was a band singer with a voice that stopped rooms, working with big orchestras and building a name that traveled fast. By 1940, She was on the cover of Life magazine because of her performance in the Broadway musical Louisiana Purchase, written by Irving Berlin. Her rise looked smooth from the outside, but everything changed in 1951 when her car collided with a truck in Pennsylvania. The driver died. She was declared at fault. A scandal like that could have ended everything she worked for. Instead, she walked back into the world with a steady face and kept going. She returned to Broadway again and again, stepping into shows like Showboat, Pal Joey, and Annie Get Your Gun. She took film roles in Behind the Eight Ball and later in American Gigolo, proving she could shift from one world to another without losing her fire. Her personal life brought its own storms. She married Milton Nathanson in 1945 and stayed with him until 1963, raising their daughter Julie, who later followed her into entertainment. In her later years, she poured her time into volunteer work, giving her energy to people who needed help. The woman who scared everyone, as Mama Carlson carried warmth and humor away from the cameras. She had been tested by tragedy, rebuilt herself, and kept a toughness that never hardened her heart. Ian Wolfe. Ian Wolfe, the man who played Hirsch with a razor-sharp tongue and perfect timing, carried a life story that stretched across 7 decades of Hollywood. When WKRP cast him as the butler, he was 86 years old. Yet he moved with the calm confidence of someone who had seen every corner of the industry and survived it. Most viewers had no idea that the quiet man behind the bow tie had already appeared in more than 400 films and television roles since the 1930s. His face had slipped through thrillers, dramas, comedies, and science fiction long before WKRP ever existed. He worked with directors like Alfred Hitchcock in Foreign Correspondent in 1940, appeared in Mutiny on the Bounty in 1935, and later stepped into George Lucas's world with THX 1138 in 1971. His gift was playing authority figures, judges, aristocrats, butlers, and sometimes a villain whose small actions sparked bigger stories. He once said he was the dust that made the stars twinkle, a quiet truth from a man who stood beside legends like Clark Gable and Marlene Dietrich. His real life was never easy. He had served as a volunteer medical specialist in World War I and knew hunger well enough to borrow money just to feed his family during the 1930s. He called the life of a character actor a path filled with terrific disappointments, both professionally and artistically, yet he kept showing up. He kept acting into his 90s, finishing his last film Dick Tracy in 1990. His final moments as Hirsch on WKRP closed a story that began in the early days of film and stretched all the way into modern television. He became a bridge between eras, a man who carried the weight of old Hollywood on his shoulders and still walked with quiet grace. Eileen Barnett. Eileen Barnett stepped onto WKRP in Cincinnati in 1981, looking like just another guest star. But her path into that episode had more turns than anyone watching could guess. She played Arlene Allen in the Season 3 episode Ask Jennifer, the woman brought in to replace Jennifer as the station's secretary. Most actors would treat a part like that as a small career moment, something quick and simple. But Eileen carried her own life into the role without even trying. She had spent years juggling acting with teaching, trying to support herself while still chasing the work she loved. And that mix of humor and quiet struggle shaped the way she walked into that character. The episode was filmed across an entire year because of scheduling problems and personal challenges she was dealing with at the time, which gave Arlene's messy, late, slightly chaotic energy a real edge. Viewers thought it was acting, but much of it came from what she was living through in real life. Her career didn't end with that episode. She went on to soap operas like Days of Our Lives and Santa Barbara, while staying connected to theater and community work. She kept showing up with that same mix of honesty and sharp humor that made her impossible to forget on WKRP. What makes her story stand out is the way her roles mirrored her life, giving everything she did a weight that came from real experience. George Wyner. George Wyner came into the WKRP world for only a short time as D. Arnold Gonzer, yet his story behind the scenes has more drama than all the sitcom plots combined. People often assume he came from the usual Hollywood grind, struggling from one side job to another, but his childhood looked completely different. His father, Edward Wyner, ran the Ritz-Carlton Hotel in Boston during the 1950s and 1960s, a place filled with famous guests and powerful people. George grew up inside that hotel, in a penthouse suite, watching the world's elite come and go as if it were a movie unfolding right outside his door. He later laughed about it, saying his childhood was the closest thing to a movie set before he ever became an actor. His break in Hollywood was wild from the start. When he landed the role of Colonel Sanders in Mel Brooks's Spaceballs, he showed up expecting a standard military-looking uniform, but was handed a costume that made him wonder if someone was joking. He kept asking people where his real uniform was until someone finally told him he was already wearing it. The pay for the job was tiny, yet the role launched him into a career that has now stretched across more than 150 TV shows and numerous films, including A Serious Man and The Devil's Advocate. His path almost went in the opposite direction, though. After studying drama at Syracuse University, he hit a string of failed auditions that made him question everything. At one point, he teamed up with another struggling actor to buy a rundown house for $15,000, planning to become landlords if acting didn't work out. Both kept going, both eventually succeeded, and George stayed in the business long enough to join the cast of Spaceballs 2. After more than 50 years, he is still chasing scenes with the same energy he had when he first arrived in Hollywood. Edie McClurg. Edie McClurg always seemed like the cheerful, slightly frazzled voice in the corner of any show she joined, especially as the wife of Herb Tarlick on WKRP. She played those roles so effortlessly that people often forgot how much life she had lived before she ever stepped onto a sitcom set. She started performing at 5 as a dancer in Kansas City, but everything changed when her teacher was arrested for a morals charge involving another underage dancer. The shock of that event pushed Edie away from performing for years. Her road back started not in acting, but in radio. She spent nearly 10 years at KCUR-FM as a news voice, DJ, and producer before she even stepped toward comedy or television. By the late 1970s, she became recognizable on shows like The Richard Pryor Show, then WKRP, and her rising career led to roles in Carrie, Ferris Bueller's Day Off, and Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. She built one of the strongest character acting careers of her era, without ever becoming a household name, slipping into roles with a warmth that made her unforgettable. Yet her real life turned darker in recent years. In 2019, her family petitioned the court for a conservatorship when they realized she was suffering from dementia and at risk of being manipulated. Then, in 2022, a court-approved caregiver was accused of sexually assaulting her and trying to take her out of California to marry her, leading to a police investigation and quick action from the courts to protect her. It was a shocking turn for someone so beloved on screen, revealing how hidden and fragile the lives of even the most familiar actors can be.